All right, let's get started. Thanks everyone. Let me just quickly introduce myself, and we are also happy to have a few very distinguished panelists with us today. So my name is Victor. I'm from our Hong Kong Foundation. I'm the head of education and research here, education and youth research here. So we are a think tank in Hong Kong, specializing in policy research and advocacy. With me, we have three panelists today. Brian Cheng, the CEO of Generation Hong Kong, a prominent NGO in addressing the gap between education and employment. We have William Chiu, the head of Future Skills, Corporate Sustainability Asia Pacific at HSBC. So I think the name is quite self-explanatory about William's job in tackling future skills programs, etc. Ben Yu, a business director at Nanhai Corporation Limited. Nanhai, you may not have heard of Nanhai, but you must have heard of one of its most prominent subsidiaries, Hong Kong 01. But they also have more, different, a very diverse portfolio of companies under the group in cinemas, skincare, etc. So we're glad to have all of these sector leaders from different sectors today, from NGOs, corporate banking, with us discussing future workforce reposition our curve. So obviously, the world is changing quickly, and especially with the pandemic, the global shift of economic landscape, trade wars, etc. This is one of the most challenging years ever. How should talents indeed prepare themselves for the future, and how should each sector prepare their talents in their sector and for the future? And indeed, what should the government do? So this is, I think, a multilateral and multi-angle effort that should involve all sectors of the society. So for this session today, without talking for too long, I know it's late in the day, and probably people are not up for really long speeches. So let's move on, and we'll divide the session into three parts. The first part, we will have each of the panelists share a few thoughts, perhaps around 10 minutes, about what they think about future workforce, and perhaps introduce their work as well. The second part, we will go into an open discussion, but before that, we will have some questions indeed for all of you here for the floor, and we encourage your participation. Anytime you have any thoughts, just go ahead, type in the chat box or raise your hand. And later we'll free to either type or your question or raise your hand. If you type your question, I'll read it out for you. If you raise your hand, I would probably call out your name, and whenever you feel free and comfortable with. So without further ado, let's get started with Brian. What's your thoughts on future workforce and
Thank
future
you,
skills?
Victor, and nice seeing all of you here. Just as Victor introduced, we are actually a small NGO in different parts of the world. So before I share my thoughts on the future workforce, I think let me give a very quick overview on what we are doing. So I have, I actually have a slide, but the host has disabled attendee screen sharing. Do you mind if you grant me the access for that? Well, but anyway, let me quickly talk through a little bit on what we are doing. So as Victor described, we are in different parts of the world. We actually started back in 2015. We are an NGO founded by McKinsey. And the reason why we were founded was because we look at the gap between education and employment at that time. So what we want to do is to train and place different adults of all ages, whether they are unemployed, underemployed, into careers that would otherwise be beyond their reach. So we are now like in 14 countries. In APAC, we are in Hong Kong, China, Australia, and Singapore. But then we are also in different parts of the world. Okay, anyway, I don't think I can do the sharing, but let me go through it. So what we do is our methodology, there are like 7 core steps. But after all, there are three main stages. One is because we want to connect education and employment, so we want to stand from the employer's shoes and look at what they want. And one of the topic that we address is future of work. So from what we do, we start from employers, and then we ask them what a top performer looks like on the first day of the job, especially those future-driven roles, the tech roles, etc. And then we design the training, recruit students, and then place them into employers. And then we track the return on investment for different stakeholders. So now across the 14 countries, we are in 4 sectors, 29 professions, and a lot of them are actually tech roles. And these tech roles are actually developed in recent years, especially after in the post-COVID world. I mean, before COVID, we already talking about digital transformation, the future of work, automation, technology, and COVID actually speeded up all these digital transformation. So we have been in different parts of the world, in different countries, we have been demonstrating our impact through working with foundations, working with employers, or even working with government. Let me give you a few examples. For example, in Singapore, we work with the government, we work with Skills Future Singapore, and then we embed our methodology in a couple of polytechnics in Singapore. And also in India, we work with the TVETs there and upskill them in order for them to have the ability to connect different underserved individuals to employment. So I think going back to today's topic, when we think about future of work or future city or what the future looks like, I would say the technological world, I mean, under COVID, digital transformation has been faster than before. And from there, I think a lot of corporates, they have been demanding a lot on tech talents or talents of a very diverse background, or they might need to have the relevant skill set in order for them to be great in that sense. But then I think on the education side, even universities, vocational schools, TVETs, or even the secondary school education system, they might not move as fast as the outside world. So there is a gap in between the two of them. So I think in the coming couple of years, it would be government, or be it other initiatives. For example, in Hong Kong, there are a lot of philanthropic foundations that might want to address the gap together. So I think it's not one single part or stakeholder's responsibility. It has to be everyone joining hands together in order for us to see to bridge the gap between the two. And in the end, I think what we want to do is to prepare not only our young people, but also for the middle-aged people. I mean, for those reskilling population, it's also important that we are transforming the skill set for all our talents in different parts of the world, and put them into a meaningful career, and that would help with different technological advancement or digital transformation. So very quick snapshot on what we are doing. Look forward to continue our discussion later on when we are in the Q&A. Thank you, Victor.
All right, thanks, Brian. Can I chip in a quick question before you go?
Sure.
You mentioned Skills Future Singapore, obviously one of the very celebrated examples of how to prepare for future, but and India as well. Is there some things that you think they have done, but Hong Kong have not? Or you can also mention it the other way around, something that you think Hong Kong is better than the other. So how do you compare across different countries?
Well, this is a good question. I think a lot of times when we are in different countries, I mean, when my colleagues, they talk about the issues in Spain, in Italy, or in India, in Pakistan, they would say, wow, Hong Kong is so good in this and that. But when we're in Hong Kong, we're thinking about, wow, Singapore is doing very great in the other way around. So of course, I mean, in Singapore, the government is driving a lot of initiatives. But then in Hong Kong, from what I have been with Generation Hong Kong since we started in 2018, early 2018, so close to 3 years. So I think Hong Kong, I mean, when compared, there are a lot of very passionate people that wants to drive, changes together. that wants to help our young people together, that they are very willing to spare their time, be it their working hours or beyond their working hours, to support different initiatives. So I think this is something that I really feel it in Hong Kong. I really see it in Hong Kong. I wouldn't say like it's entirely the government responsibility, but then what I see here is like, if we can demonstrate some of the differences here in Hong Kong, then we might be able to showcase that to government. And then government is more, evidence-based when compared to like other countries. Other countries might be very proactive in driving new initiatives, but Hong Kong government might be more evidence-based. They want to see like that you are demonstrating certain impact before they would start like funding you to do something that's actually new to them. So I mean, yeah. So the other way around, when you look at Singapore, the good thing is like the government is driving, and that's why I mean it's sort of like polytechnics are being very motivated to do this because the government is leading it. And I think like they are really smart. I mean, like if they adopt a methodology, I mean, our methodology is not the best, but there is some certain value add that would help polytechnics to upskill not only the beneficiaries that they are serving, but also the delivery quality as a whole, and some of the new professions, how we can unpack those professions and put it back to the education. As I said earlier, like when you think about the gap between education and employment, the employment world is changing very, very fast. So you really need someone who could like unpack what's actually out there, and then to upgrade the curriculum from time to time in order to tailor to the needs of the industry. And that training would be helpful for people who did not have the background beforehand to be upskilled and to be trained into those professions. And that would actually, in the end, like going back to our mission, you're actually helping to change their life trajectories. So I think, yeah, that's my 2 cents on, the comparison.
Thank you, Brian. Evidence-based is a very nice way of putting it, but we'll follow up on that later. May I pass the time next to William on what's your thoughts on future skills and workforce?
Thank you, Victor. Hello, everybody. Maybe I first quickly start by giving everyone an introduction to my area of work. So I work for HSBC. I hope you have heard about our bank. It's a pretty big company, and we operate in 64 markets or territories around the world. And we have a big presence here in Asia. So we think of Asia as a home market, and then we have been here around something like 150 or 55 years already. So I think more than a bank, HSBC has been a part of the community. So we are the one of the earliest banks that was established in a number of our markets. So we are actually not just a business, but we think of ourselves as a member of the community. And so our approach to helping the community and approach to looking into our future is might be a little different from what other companies might be able to do. So just to give you an example, not a lot of our corporate peers would have a department named Corporate Sustainability. So this is the name of my department, and at Corporate Sustainability, we are we think of sustainability as not like a separate function from the bank, but we think of our mandate as trying to integrate sustainability into the agenda of the whole operation. So by saying that, we like to encourage our colleagues when they think of our products and services, they really look at how they will address the needs of the community and think long term and not just about the short term gains. So there are 3 particular areas that we focus on. One is called future skills, which is the area that I manage in this part of the world. And basically, our work is to help not just the community, but also members within the bank, like my fellow colleagues at HSBC, and also our customers to think about the needs in the future. So there are 3 drivers behind future changes in the future. One, as Brian already mentioned, I think that technological advancement is really a big driver into in our future work environment. That is self-explanatory, and which is already explained by Brian. I think there's a second aspect, and that is how the shift towards a low carbon economy is going to make an impact to a lot of our different sectors. Say, for example, a lot of the industries, manufacturers, or they can be in textile, they may be in logistics, they might be in a whole range of other sectors. Their future is going to be increasingly be required to become more low carbon, right? I don't know if my audience right here would be familiar with the concept, but basically as the economy shifts towards a low carbon economy, that means it's not like it's just a matter of making changes to our energy sources, or whether we are doing implementing green installations in our facilities. It's not like just that, but it's also about a mindset change of how we operate differently. And so in other parts of the world, we have seen things like green jobs being created around the world. They are opportunities because there are new jobs being created. But on the flip side of the coin is also about risk, right? So a lot of people might feel like they need to upskill their abilities. They need to relook at how they will survive in that long-term future, and make a decent living, and so there are like opportunities and challenges, and the third driver, as explained by Brian, like COVID-19 is one of them, but then more in the more general terms, we think of them as like VUCA, right? Like volatile, like complicated, and unexpected, all those changes. So we deal with things like not just COVID, there might be another pandemic coming in our way if we're unlucky enough. So there are all kinds of geopolitical changes as well. So here in Hong Kong, we are all very familiar with what changes that our young people are facing. So we are, as we, and so the whole working environment is going to change and is becoming more difficult to anticipate. So here at corporate sustainability, in my job is to prepare our young people. Well, I hate to say I will have a focus on young people. It's not like I want to ignore the rest of the community, but then really we do have a special focus on young people, and then we build programs that would help young people prepare for an unpredictable future. So one focus is that we try to build soft skills into people's like abilities. So we believe that soft skills will survive changes, right? I mean, they are like transferable. They are universally like practical, like whether you're in this market or that market, or whether we're in the green carbon economy or in the less green economy, right? So green jobs, no, and so soft skills will remain important, and then that's one focus, right? But then we do want to respond to the needs in different parts of the world, since we operate in like 64 of them. So we try to implement a locally specific program. Say in Hong Kong, we want to focus more on talent development, like innovation and technology. We want to talk more about like entrepreneurial skills, etc. In India, we talk about something else, right? And then in China, we also talk about something else. And then at HKSESSA, we want to focus more on the marginalized community, meaning as the world change, we don't want to be seen as only supporting one segment of the youth population and help them become successful. Rather, we like the rest of the community, like including those who would not have the equal opportunities towards like access to technology or other opportunities. We don't want them to be left behind. So it's important, as we at HKSESSA, as a company of our size, we are not going to be seen as not trying to do something with the transition. I mean, it's all about facilitating the transition. We are not promoting a digital gap. We are not promoting a gender gap. We are not promoting a skills gap. So it's quite important for us to be mindful how our programs would have would make a difference to the community as a whole. So in a nutshell, I'm explaining to you our logic and our strategy in implementing future skills programs in our agenda. Of course, we do other things too. We talk about tackling climate change. So our stakeholders might be green groups. Our stakeholders are universities and researchers. We also partner up with companies along the supply chain. So we want to be a platform for change in a partnership with our stakeholders. And lastly, that we also promote sustainable financial products. So those are quite different from the kind of community programs that I have spoken about, but those are more related to the banking products, right? Like how we encourage ESG investment, like how we create opportunities, like how we create awareness of those opportunities, like how they might be feasible and attractive investment options, so to speak. So those are the sustainable finance related activities of our department. So I have spoken for a long time, but without knowing a bit about our audience, I'm unable to tailor-make my little presentation to your needs. So I look forward to have a discussion with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, William. Can I also similarly fire a question your way? So you mentioned about equipping people with soft skills, when under a changing world. But have the soft skills, well, while you mentioned, soft skills are important because they are transferable, etc. Do you see the soft skills themselves having changed as a result of this changing world as well? And what do you see the priorities should be?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Just to give you an example, I think when we talk about soft skills, we tend to focus on some more of the basic, like the most essential core skills, which are like communication skills, collaboration, creativity, those sort of skills. But then with COVID-19, we understand that the soft skills are themselves changing, and also sometimes we like to find a focus. So increasingly, I realize more people are talking about resilience as a skill. So this is one example of how we might prioritize our learning objectives. So resilience can mean a lot of things. It means a mindset, like how we have a growth mindset, and it also means like how we learn from our mistakes. It's about like how we get ourselves prepared for the next crisis. It also means like how we prepare ourselves on different aspects. So for example, at HKSESSA, we talk a lot about financial resilience. When we talk about financial resilience, it means so many things, right? It starts from whether we are really making financial plans for ourselves, whether we understand investment opportunities, whether we are managing our risks, right? And whether we have a certain behavior and that might need to change, right? Whether we have the right kind of financial habits, like saving money or managing our expenses, etc. So yes, to answer your question, yes, certain soft skills might be more relevant than others in different situations. But then, one more thing, even for a company of our size, we also talk about some very basic soft skills, like creativity, innovation, and resilience, and so to speak. So there's no such thing as very general soft skills. All soft skills are important. It's just that sometimes we talk more about one of them than some others, depending on our situation.
Thank you. Next up, let me pass the time to Ben. What's your thoughts?
Hi guys. So representing Nanhai Corporation Limited here, basically a company of 30 years or so. Started off as a real estate, very traditional real estate company, and then it started to move into IT in China. So basically our company is, our IT company is Sino-I, which is, you can imagine as a kind of a GoDaddy.com domain name hosting and a Wix.com mix. So that's that. And then we also have a media operation, which Victor mentioned earlier. The most prominent in Hong Kong being HK01, which over the past 5 years, well, it'll be our fifth year anniversary in around March, I believe. We've grown from 0 to 1, being the largest online media platform today in Hong Kong. And also we have a cinema chain in mainland China, which is actually currently the largest cinema chain with the most screens, with I think around 3,000 screens throughout the whole of China, including areas in Xinjiang and Tibet and Yunnan, etc. So, but today I think the thing that I would really like to share in terms of this Future City Summit and the future of the how we can envision future skills is really the skincare company that Victor mentioned earlier, namely our company that we acquired around a few years ago called Crabtree and Evelyn. So this is a complete end-to-end business, which means that we really, this is our little product, a little bit of ad placement here, we really create this product end-to-end, which means that from the research and development that goes into how this skincare works, to the claims, all the way to the production, to the end product ending up in Victor's hands in Hong Kong. This whole process we manage, we own. And so for the longest of times, Crabtree and Evelyn, in case people don't know, and I'm going to share my screen here just to give you a little bit of a feel, it's actually a business that's been around for around 70 years already. So we only acquired it a few years ago, but this is what it used to look like. People who have stayed in London or in the US and in Hong Kong, in fact, may recognize these stores. It's a very, very traditional brick and mortar store. And so you can see these kind of stores. In Hong Kong alone, there was around 34 such stores. And so you can imagine that the headcount, the fixed costs involved in the rent and the inventory, the kind of stock that we have to keep in all these kind of stores, in our hundreds of stores worldwide, plus the logistics systems. This is a very, very expensive process, and it's very, very difficult. And in fact, the reason why we acquired this company was because it was kind of moving down as a sunset company, but we still believe that its brand value was very important. And why am I mentioning all of this is because actually 2 years ago, we made the decision to close down all our stores. I mean, and this was a big, painful decision from our P&L, but it was also, in hindsight now, very, very wise, not only because of COVID, where now COVID has hurt all retail stores, but mainly because we decided the main reason why we did this push was not to reduce our costs, but because we believed that we had to move into an e-commerce and internet world. And we had to understand how to communicate properly with our new customers who are no longer those who would digest or consume products just because of the retail store or because of what they saw on TV from a traditional commercial. So the part that I want to talk about today is not the part where this product goes from the factory, from the mine to the factory and an end product. I just want to talk about it when we have this product now and how it ends up to your hands. Because in the past, how this goes about is that any company, whether it's Nike or it's Crabtree and Evelyn, we usually have two kinds of budgets. Basically, we find a 4A agency to create the advertising, then we think of which platforms to distribute this, and there's a lot of middle people all throughout this process, right? So there's agencies finding agencies to bring this into whether it's TVB or HBO, and to give you that kind of an advertising experience. And then later I have to distribute that through retailers, whether it's Sephora or whatever it may be, such that you can finally get it in your hands, whether it's 7-Eleven or actually my retail store. Now, this requires a very large division of labor. And for the longest of time, many, many individuals were really just cogs in this large machine, right? But with the internet age, basically, there's a very, very important concept now that I'd like to share with everyone, which is DTC, which is direct to consumer. And what that really means is that actually all the middle people have gone away. So once I have this product today, I can effectively sell to Victor directly, or Brian or William or anyone here directly online. I do not need a retail store. I can communicate with you directly through Facebook or Instagram. And the way in which that content is created does not require those massive cameras and big campaigns anymore as it used to be. So how do we manage that transition? And the first thing that I want to say is that, number one, it's incredibly painful because there are so many staff, there is so many vested interests in this process that when you go from a traditional brick and mortar business into a complete DTC business, what happens is from our P&L side, our cost structure goes down, but everything in the cost is actually people's lives, right? So it was very, very difficult to transition from that to this, first of all. And not everyone could do that. And we had to let go of a lot of people, especially in our storefront. But on the other hand, it's also painful because for the people who are trying to do DTC, who are trying to do e-commerce and do digital marketing, it's a completely new world. How do you communicate in Instagram, in Facebook, in Google? How do you play with the algorithm such that the content that you put all your heart into really can show up in your screen? All of this requires a lot of new learnings. And then how do you interact with customers in a very authentic way whilst balancing your P&L? So all these questions are very, very challenging. But what does this really show? It shows, number one, that actually we are already increasingly moving towards a new world where knowledge and IQ, the ability to analyze things, is not really as important as it used to be, where someone really knows everything in and out, because the world is constantly changing. And this really echoes what William mentioned earlier, which is in our company, Crabtree and Evelyn, we really emphasize two other kinds of IQs other than traditional IQ. And one is, before we go into the concept of resilience, the first concept that we really emphasize is EQ, emotional quotient, instead of intelligence quotient. What does EQ mean for us? It means that the ability to work with team members. And why is that so important? Hello? Am I being cut? Because I see.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, yeah. So why is emotional intelligence so important? Because the ability to work with team members means that you do not have to rely on your own knowledge base and you can back and forth. The ability to analyze things alone is not really as effective in our experience when you really get challenged nonstop by people who work towards the same goal. So the ability to have that kind of emotional intelligence is very, very critical in our team. But the second type of intelligence that we also value is what William mentioned, which is resilience. We call that AQ, adversity quotient, the ability to withstand adversity. And what does that mean? In a nutshell, it really just means what William said, the ability to take failure and try again. But effectively, that's why in Crabtree and Evelyn, in the China team or in the Hong Kong team, and in global, we usually advocate this mantra, which is it's fine to fail, but you have to fail fast. So we really advocate fast failing. And why is that? Because it's all about getting back up. And when you are trying out these new platforms, whether it's YouTube algorithms or in China, Tmall, and all these different kinds of payment methods and interactive methods, you have to keep trying and you have to keep messing up. And if you don't mess up, you cannot improve. And if you don't have a team of good people with good EQ, you don't have a support basis. And with that, I think that is the most important thing that I believe that has resulted in Crabtree's relative success in the past the last quarter, Q4. But it's also the kind of mantra that we'd like to spread throughout the whole of Nanhai Corporation. And I believe that that is part of the reason why HK01 in the past 4 or 5 years has also gone from a 0 to one of the largest internet companies now in Hong Kong. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben. A quick question for you, and I think after that, probably for everyone as well. We have 2 questions typed in the chat box. How emerging technology, automation, digital transformation mean for the people who have been made redundant, the unemployed people and workers who are so used to manual work, like you mentioned, who you unfortunately have to lay off. Parts of the society who may not be necessarily ready for a rapid change of technology. What would you say to those people, and what would be your advice to them trying to keep up with the changes, staying competitive, being reskilled, etc.?
Okay, so I will answer this really generally, and then perhaps the floor could go to the other two delegates as well. I think the most appropriate example to this is our company, Dadi Cinemas, which is, we had 3,000 cinema screens around the whole of China, hundreds and hundreds of film theaters there. And that's a very, very manual work where you have to, say, welcome to the cinema, give them tickets, and then really do the popcorn. And what am I trying to say here is that imagine COVID. Actually, in COVID, when COVID first started in mainland China, which is where our operations went, the cinemas, our hundreds and hundreds of cinemas, which was actually the basis of a lot of our other operations, the cash flow, it completely stopped. It went from not from 100 million to 50 million, it went from 100 million to 0. So how could we live like that when cinemas were actually stopped for 2-3 months, if not more? And they actually went all the way until May, if I recall. And because even when China started opening up, they were still not very comfortable with opening up these enclosed spaces in the cinemas. So I'm not talking about tech per se, but just from this sector, you can see that, wow, we had tens of thousands of staff doing this kind of work. There are staff who have been there for just a few months. There have been staff who have been there for many years. What do we do with them? And to that point, then, I want to say that actually the role of government is very, very important. Because if it wasn't because of government subsidies, if it wasn't because of certain policies that our company took as well, right, we could not keep a lot of them. And in the end, we had to let some off, but we kept quite a lot of them. But why? And to that extent, it's because of the government giving us subsidies and because of certain policies that we adopted as well. But like I said, it's really the macro environment that has to determine these kinds of things. In terms of, if we're just looking at our P&L, then we have to let them go in Crabtree or any other business, if it is a purely P&L issue. We cannot, because if we do not sacrifice this sector, like this marginalized group, then actually the whole group might be compromised. And that is a very, very serious issue for us. Now, of course, if you're talking about the skills that must come along for an individual hoping to transition from someone who believes that they're entering into a redundancy in society, especially, for example, someone perhaps who's been in retail for like 30-something years. I am not of the opinion, as many say, that, hey, just learn how to program. It's not that easy. I mean, I've been trying and I'm not really learning that. It's very, very difficult. And that's why, how does the government support these kinds of changes? Not for the young people really, but for the older generation. This is a question that I do not believe that I'm in the right position or capable to answer right now. But I do believe that the answer, if it is not given actively by a government willing to actively talk about these problems, I don't know how we can begin. So that's my point.
Thanks, Ben, again. With that, I would like to move into a more open flow discussion between all of us who have spoken. But obviously, we have all witnessed, I think I do want to start by continuing on the point we just mentioned, which I feel is a very interesting topic of the very tough decisions that corporates and different sectors have to make as a result of the pandemic, which arguably only accelerates something that has been already happening, I have to say, which is part of digital transformation. We have seen corporates, Cathay Pacific, for example, having been through very tough times and changes like this, having been partly, you can say, forced to lay off people. But the role of the government is important, but probably not just important in terms of giving subsidies to keep companies and jobs afloat, but keeping them sustainable in the long run by actually upskilling and reskilling people. So what would you say to people who are eager to upskill and reskill themselves? And the second question, I think, is what is the role of the government in that scenario? Can I also invite Brian and William into this discussion?
I can go first if you doesn't mind. So I think there are 3 levels that we have to think about. The first one is individual level. Second one is in an organizational level, and third one is on the policy level. On an individual, well, you know, I think like future of work, we have been hearing it for the past couple of years already. Like by 2030, there'll be 15% of jobs that are actually being displaced. This is actually like a scary figure that, you know, oh, will my job be kept? But then I think behind displacement of old jobs, the actually creation of new jobs at the same time. So the reason why I'm talking about individual level is actually like, I think we also have to be very careful about what we are learning day by day. Let me give you an example. Like a couple of years ago, like 10 years ago, when Facebook first started, no one has imagined like Facebook would actually make an impact to like marketing. There's digital marketing, we can do promotion on Facebook. When Google, before Google, probably like Yahoo, Google, we're searching for stuff on internet. We would have never imagined that would come up with like SEO, SEM as a career. This is something that actually like whoever is curious, whoever is like, I have a growth mindset, I could actually learn things very fast. I'm very aware of what's actually available in the market. That is the intrinsic that I think Ben and William talk about as well. Because in the 21st century, everything is changing. Even in a COVID world, everything is changing very fast as well. So on an individual level, it's important for you to have like, for you to tell people to be like, you know, very aware of what's available in the market. I mean, there are like 4 core mindset that generation is like advocating: future orientation, growth mindset, and of course the other 2 is more on on a personal basis, which is personal responsibility and persistence, a little bit like resilience that Ben and William talked about. So after individual level, then you have to think about like organizational level. In the end, you want to reskill them because the outside world is changing, the corporate world is changing, the employer's demand, the employer's need, the employer's requirement is changing. If that's the case, then what's next? So I think the other important piece is really to understand what's actually changing, what's actually the new normal of hiring, what the latest demand is, what the latest requirements of the skills is, and whether from that end, on the education side, I mean, not secondary school education, but as a whole education, you could include vocational education, you could include like skills training, upskilling, etc. Whether that is actually breaching the gap. And I think the last one is Ben has talked about policy level, I think, which is important. The government has to have the foresight and like, you know, this is something that we would see in 5 years. And now we are building our internal societal capacity in order to cope with the change that we see in 5 years' time. So I think policy level is definitely one very core thing that would drive back to organization and individual level. But I think like we can't put every single responsibility to the government as well. In the society, I think each of us have a role to play. And so I think like, you know, when I look at it, I think there are these 3 levels that we have to be thinking about.
Hello, let me also chip in, and sometimes I admire researchers who can frame an answer by 3 levels. I can't do that, so so that's a skill for me. But I think this is a very hard question to answer, because I think we do wish to the entire society to move with us. So it's totally a very important question to address. And I hate to say this, but I think that wherever that we the people are, like which sector that they belong, or whether they feel like they are catching up or not catching up, I think at the end of the day, everybody will have to take ownership over their own needs and their own future. I think it requires some kinds of a mindset change. So first of all, well, when we are students and when we're young, we kind of go to school, we receive an education, we go through a program, and then people would just tell us what to do, right? And over time, we do what we're expected to do. But then for the future, I think since no one seems to have a crystal ball which would tell us how the future would look like, it is no longer the case that we can expect anybody to tell us what to do. So So I think at the end of the day, the cultural change, I think the mindset change that is required from each of us is that we do not do what is expected us to do. It's not like you want to sell a mortgage, you want to promote a credit card or something. So you would need to find a license to sell these products, right? Rather, you think ahead, like how you will anticipate the change will be in the future, and you try to get yourself prepared for it without people pushing you from behind. So which means it requires a kind of mindset change that requires us to take responsibility and to take ownership over our own future. So it's not just for the mass, it's not just for the general public, it's also for each of us as well. Of course, for the general public, it might be a harder thing for them to do because they might not be have ready access to a lot of information, to market intelligence, etc. But then still, the need for them to take ownership for their own life will, I think, is still applicable. It's important for them to develop that concept. I think I think big corporates and I think the government, it's not like they have no role to play in all this. But I do believe that that being big corporates and being the government, we do need to encourage and facilitate. We do wish to help the process, so there is perhaps some kind of a safety net in case like people don't catch up, they won't like suffer too much, right? Rather, I think being market facilitators and being the government, we build a kind of habitat and a kind of environment that make learning and taking responsibility happen, right? So I'm getting a bit philosophical here without being able to provide a very concrete solution. But I think it's important for all of us to start from the very beginning, and that is the kind of attitude and what kind of ownership that we have to develop for ourselves. So I think that's a very long answer from me on this topic.
Thanks, but Ben, you have something to
Oh,
add?
sure. We can move on.
No, that's totally fine. Please.
Oh, no. So I think I can just share two examples, right? One example is I have a staff member who is 19 years old. Okay, so very young, didn't really go to university, and she came to our company to do live streaming. So basically, if you are familiar with Tmall or whatever it may be, there's this platform where you can live stream and sell stuff like, hey, Victor, hi guys, welcome to my store. And then, blah, 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 we have these kind of promotions, all that. Before she came to our company, we can say that her level of education is not very high, but she was very, very driven. And she wanted to do live streaming, so she applied for the job. And we were looking for that opening. We had that opening, so hey, why not? But she had zero experience. So 3 days after she enrolled, she had to do live streaming. And so prior to doing this, she really had to prepare and read up on, see how everyone is doing it and see what she wanted to say. And she had to do it for 4 hours straight. Now, she had to do it for 4 hours straight. And so she totally forgot her lines. She had to repeat the same thing for 6-minute intervals, because every 6 minutes, the users in the shop would bounce out. So she has to repeat the same thing. Hey, 欢迎光临, welcome to my store, blah, 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 and then move on and repeat it over and over for 4 hours. So at the end of the 4 hours, she managed to make a few hundred renminbi. She was so happy. But what I was trying to say with this example is, number one, the growth mindset, the willingness to try, does not really need that many hard skills in order to do, first of all. Because let me say this, after 2 months since she came on board, right now, one session, she could get 70,000 renminbi. And during Double 11, just recently in the month of, Double 11, November 11th, which is a big sales event here, I think they closed around 300,000 renminbi. So from zero, a few hundred to 300,000, and really based on her. So it's possible, of course, she had a raise and all that, and the ROI was very good. But what I wanted to mention with this is that you just need to try first, and don't be afraid of failing. This is what I meant earlier by fail fast. Just keep trying and keep going. And as long as the company supports you, just try to improve. It's okay. Let's reflect upon it. But I think I want to mention, besides this colleague whose name is Milk, okay, so actually like milk, there was actually someone behind her always. Her name is Kelly. Kelly was always the girl who worked with Milk to help her, support her, give her a drink, to show her the lights, and then to plan the script prior to them moving on to this. Kelly also has no experience with live streaming. And so what am I trying to say here? So in the first month when they were doing this live streaming, Kelly was there every single day for hours, just sitting there with her friend, with her colleague. And the main message I'm trying to put here is that it's going to be very hard transitioning, whether it's for the young people or for the old people, right? It's hard for anyone who's just not familiar with this environment. Of course, it's much more difficult for people who are already with their habits, okay? But it's very, very important to have a support system, and a support system that is not just your family. Because I think for the longest of times, we've been too atomistic. Everyone is just our own KPI and whatever. But gradually, in terms of corporate governance, I think it's very important KPI is how teams work together to support each other. And in what way do we do it such that this makes sense from a P&L basis, but also from a corporate culture perspective. It's very important to have a support system. And I believe that even in high schools and primary schools in Hong Kong today, for example, traditional schools do not really encourage so much that students work with one another in a very holistic way, achieving certain goals together, and thereby building the kind of emotional intelligence and support system that they need outside of family. And when you have family members who are also both working outside, then you have an even larger gap in that need for support to face failure effectively, because you will face constant failure as technology improves. That's why I really believe in the whole idea of EQ and AQ, and that's the first example that I wanted to say. The second example is real quick, which is the policy level. And I want to say it's definitely not just about subsidies, because government gives you subsidies, but it doesn't last for that long, and it's not enough to cover everything. So it's actually very, very important for government to also give direction, which is what Brian mentioned just now, which is 5 years later, what will it be? But in the case in China, for example, in cinemas, they have to say, hey, 1 year later, when you revive, what will it be? Will you really revive? Or should we cut all our cinemas away? Or should we hold on to that? Because will the cinema business come back? Let me give you an example. In Turkey, okay, prior to their third wave, okay, so now in Turkey, the country, they have a very, very large cinema business too. I have friends who work there, okay? Now, it's very bad now again, but earlier there was a time when they wanted to release all their cinemas again. But when they opened up all their cinemas, guess what happened? They had no films to show. The reason being, none of the Hollywood companies, none of the local domestic film producers had movies to show. So the cinemas did not have anything to do anyways, and no one was willing to go. But in China, it's a bit different, because while they supported our cinemas, they were also supporting the film industry in general, such that immediately, once we opened up, we had movies coming in. We had things coming in. And that's why it's very important for government to give vision and also give support and articulate that vision in a way that the people like corporates or individuals are able to frame their own working habits based on that. Whether they fail or not, it's not the government's fault. So I definitely do not believe it's all government, but at the same time, it's really important to have direction, or else we cannot plan accordingly. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Brian. And thanks everybody for the very insightful comments. I think we have opened up a lot more arenas for further discussions here, including the role of government, policy level. Obviously, businesses love clarity and all that. B, growth mindset, AQ, EQ, resilience, whatever name you want to put to it, and this kind of skills that people need to have. And perhaps I can direct this to William, because I saw there is another question for you, which is related perhaps to business clarity as well, because the question reads, how client-facing roles within banks, such as private bankers, are able to prepare themselves in the face of technological advancement. Obviously, in the sustainability role, we have seen people talking about whether banking, sales, traders would be replaced by robots soon. I think this is a good question for you to answer as well.
Thank you, Victor, and thank you for the question. I think having a client focused attitude, I think it will be core to success of any bankers. Well, not just bankers, but any customer-facing professional. I think this is a core skill that cannot be replaced. It is about human skills. It is about like how you will communicate with your customers and your clients and understand their needs and walk with them and support them in good times and bad times, etc. And of course, it's also about the ability to promote products and also to find opportunities in your customers, whether it's in the balance sheet or in the like according to their needs, right? Luckily, I do not feel like this is a job that can be replaced by a robot very easily. But I think going back to the question, I think in terms of getting prepared for an IT or latent future, I think first of all we want to focus on like what it means by catching up and really to prepare ourselves. I think it is not about learning about these like blockchain technologies. It's not about learning about these automation technologies, etc. It is. I think it's more about how we make good use of them. It's more about the application aspect, first of all. And so while we leave the application development work to a lot of IT professionals, we as business, we would drive the change by being able to say how we're going to make good use of these technologies. And also, I think going back to my earlier point, I think it's more important that we focus on the soft skills side, because technology changes all the time. I mean, these couple of years we talk about blockchain. I mean, 5 years later, we'll be talking about something else altogether. So it's about how we will learn, like self-teach some of these technologies and also opportunities, because I think that the tools are going to evolve ever more quickly. I think I have sufficiently responded to the first question. I think it's a great question. And I think the other question is also very interesting. So let me also quickly address it. So it is about the education system, like how, and also how youth will respond to, say, the green future. So I think that the education system is not going to really catch up to the market changes, because we all know that the education system changes happen gradually and cannot move very fast. But then being in the corporate sector, we know, and then we have a lot of good people here in the sector who are very willing to connect with the education sector to enable schools to make connections with the outside world, and also to help teachers. I believe teachers is at the core of the solution. Meaning, I think teachers would themselves play a key role in helping students develop soft skills, and also it's important for the teachers to also pick up soft skills so that they will become role models and evolve as the society evolve. And should I also respond to the last question, or should we focus on the first two questions now, Victor?
Oh, please go ahead.
I'm just having too much fun answering questions, and I think let me answer very quickly to the question on green, on the low carbon economy, because that's a concept that I raised earlier. I think we don't know what that means, right, at the moment, because it is a emerging concept. In Hong Kong, we don't see how the green economy is going to really affect our society in a huge way. I think in some other countries and markets, it will impact the local economy in different ways. So I think one way to cope with that kind of future is to really understand once again how market trends are going to be, and make sure that we think long term, and then we are not just interested in getting a job after our graduation. When we think long term, we are more able to anticipate changes in the future. And by saying that, I once again being very long-winded, I talk about soft skills rather than encouraging young people to focus on the professional skills per se. So in Hong Kong, a lot of people are still thinking about encouraging the kids into financial sector. But then being from a bank myself, I would go out to the schools to say, oh, please don't. Please think about a more diverse possibilities and pathways rather than encouraging all our sons and daughters into the banking sector.
Right.
There must be other options.
Thanks, William. I think we all have touched upon school systems for a few times. I would like to get thoughts from Brian on that regard. What are the, because William commented that schools are not up to the task in terms of equipping youngsters from generations experience of working with schools and employers. What do you see the gap as?
I think William has a really great point. Like teachers has a key role to play, because I mean, we could help young people, but we couldn't help the whole system. And the people that are actually very, very important are teachers. But the other way around, I mean, it's beyond teachers and social workers as well. Because for teachers, social workers, their first job is a teacher. Their first job is a social worker. And then when they are actually in the school system, when they teach, when you look at the curriculum as well, like 20 years ago when I was in high school and I was in secondary school, we were learning cosine tangent in mathematics. And today we are still learning cosine tangent in mathematics, for example. Just an example. I mean, when you think about curriculum, when you think about exposure, these are something that, it hasn't been like adopting to what the outside world is. But does that mean the students have no exposure? No. I mean, I was a judge in a competition, but by a foundation, and they had a really great, they had a really great concept in bringing in students to be like entrepreneurial, to solve a problem that they see in their own community or in their own neighborhood. And from that experience, it's actually they combine a lot of what they learn in school to what they are actually out there in the outside world. So I think going back to what William has talked about and what Belinda asked in the chat box, the fundamental thing is whether young people have enough awareness on what the outside world is. And if you want to use one term to describe it, it's whether there's a systematic career and life development strategy in Hong Kong. So having said that, if you want to have a good career and life development strategy, it has to be a whole school approach. It has to bring in businesses, because teachers, they don't have the connections, and they are so busy in teaching, they are so busy in helping students to get a good results in public exam, because that seems to be the only way out. But then if you want to change that, you have to be like thinking from a teacher's point of view, thinking from parents' point of view. Parents is another thing that teachers is actually like reacting to what parents need as well sometimes. You have to like change their mindset and tell them like there are actually a lot of other jobs. I was in a discussion with a friend like 1 or 2 weeks ago. One of the parents want their kid to go into medicine, but the kids actually is not interested. The kid was interested in going to biomedical, but the parent was concerned. What's actually available in biomedical? If like would it be like graduating from biomedical means he will be unemployed? But then actually, when you look at like banks or iBanks, they're actually a team where biomedical experts sit together and help them solve something on that side. And biomedical, on the other hand, they could generate a lot of stuff that would value a lot in terms of intellectual property, the IP of it. In the end, I think it's really about the lack of awareness, or the outside world has been changing too fast. But then there is a gap. Both of them are not connected with one another. They are not speaking to one another. And that said, I think young people, they have very minimum exposure to what's actually available in the market. So going back to my point, I think we need a very good career life development strategy in Hong Kong that would bring different stakeholders together in a school system in order for them to be like having the real exposure. And back to the question about how they could learn soft skills. I think soft skills would not be taught by a specific subject. They have to experience it. They have to go through the process. They have to learn from it. They have to reflect from it. And that's the way that they gain soft skills. Take me as an example. I was in a good secondary school, but I was never in the top 100. Even when I was in Form 6, there was just 120 or 110 people in Form 6. I could never get into the top 100. I was not interested in studying at all. But then I did a lot of activities. I was the team leader in getting a store in the night market before Chinese New Year. And that was a really great experience because I learned a lot from that experience. And that's where the soft skills came from. In the very beginning, my soft skills were terrible. Like I didn't know how to lead a team, didn't know how to manage a team, didn't know how to communicate. But that was the experience that I reflect and I learned from it. So when going back to the actual secondary school system, whether we give them enough chances to fail, whether we give them enough chances to learn, to fail, and to learn and to fail, it's a cycle. I mean, no one is born to be a successful person. But whether they could learn early, they could fail early. I think Ben talked about it, failing early as well. I would say like, it's now in a very well-protected environment because everyone would be thinking about getting a good score in your DSE, you would get a good future. But that's proven not to be true because employers, business world is demanding way more than your actual score in the exam, your actual GPA, where you come from university.
Thanks, Brian. I think what we have touched upon here, is critical topics. I think giving school systems, giving them the chance to fail, to experience. I'd just like to chip in a comment, I think, to all of the audience here, because obviously we have naturally transited into looping Q&As into our panel discussion as well. I think that is great. So I would like to welcome everybody to raise up more questions. I do realize that this is not a Zoom seminar, it's a Zoom meeting. So I don't think you can raise your hand here. So if you would like to, speak, just give me a wave. You can either, directly message me, or you can turn on your camera. I'll get a hint, and I will come and I'll invite you to speak. So please feel free if you'd like to speak, or you would like to type in more comments in the chat box as well. But with that, I would like to perhaps challenge all three of you a little bit on this soft skills question that there seems to be some agreement that soft skills is ultra important, perhaps to some extent more important than hard skills. I think, but the other side of looking at it is under digital transformation, people need skills of, for example, AI, blockchain, IoT, etc. Not just on the tech sector. I think it's also on, for example, even if I do arts, I now need to know how to use AI to construct paintings, for example. So that is covering each and every sector. So you can't. It's difficult, I think, to simply impress employers by telling them you have soft skills, because it's hard to demonstrate that in the interview. It's hard to demonstrate resilience in an interview and get them to hire you. It's hard to demonstrate much of these qualities. So it's hard to simply write soft skills on the CV and expect to get an interview and then get a job afterwards. So what would you say to the audience who face obviously every one of us, I think including us as well, in next 5, 10, 20 years time, who would obviously face challenges in terms of the shifting job market dynamics and how to keeping up with the rising requirements of different jobs, and how to get employers impressed, how to keep ourselves up to date, and not just keep ourselves up to date, but to demonstrate that we have the capability to take a certain task on.
Hello, should I go first?
Yes, please.
Well, I don't know what other panelists might think, but I do agree that hard skills are very important. I think hard skills are what would launch you a job in the first place, right? Because there is a certain expectation, there is a certain job requirements that job seekers would need to fulfill, and and they will have to demonstrate their competencies and demonstrate that they are ready to take on the responsibilities. So by focusing on soft skills, we are not saying the hard skills are not important. Rather, they are meant for different things. When I spoke about soft skills, I think I was focusing on what really help people thrive in the future, what makes people successful, and how people will stay in a job, how people will do well, right, in the long run. So I do believe hard skills are important because it helps the employers notice you. They look at your CV, they know you've got certain technical skills, etc. But then I have to point out that as you walk into an interview room, oftentimes the interviewers would take your technical skills kind of for granted, right? Because you have demonstrated yourself in your last jobs. We kind of know that you're good, and then you look at your grades, etc. But then whether or not you're going to launch that job, or whether that people would expect you to do well in the future, it's really based on your personality, based on whether you share the same values as with your employer, and whether there's a good fit in terms of personalities and in your attitude, etc. So while I agree that hard skills are very important, I also cannot I also have to emphasize that, like, employees these days also look at the softest things, and so for a company like HSBC, as we welcome new joiners to the bank, we are, of course, would welcome people who do accounting or finance already. But then we also welcome the music majors. We also welcome the engineering graduates. We also welcome the history students, right? Because they would have demonstrated that they can learn, and then they would have demonstrated their ability to fit in and to develop themselves and to have an aspiration as they enter the company. So I think I have tried to articulate my point on soft skills and hard skills.
Let me add on a little bit to that. Is that okay, Victor?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so what I want to say is that you're totally right when you say, if you need a good GPA, you need to have a good education, like you need these hard results in your CV in order to thrive or find a job, or even if it's a lousy job in Hong Kong when the labor market is so competitive, right? And that's like, I don't want to go all the way back to like Hong Kong and blah blah blah. I mean, that might be because I'm from HK01 and we're always very critical, and that might be why I'm always talking about policy and things like that. But actually, I think going back to corporate though, I think soft skills is not just for students. I think the people who really need to learn soft skills is also corporate HR, is also corporate management and middle management especially. And that starts from the top to the bottom. Because if corporate HR only looks at, or if their KPI is to look at like the hard results, then naturally they are going to interview their candidates in a way that would only sift through only the most excellent CVs, and find out that they are missing so many candidates who cannot be represented by their CVs. And that requires a dialogue. That requires much more effort. And sometimes some companies don't have that resource or that kind of time or corporate leadership to allow for that kind of interview to take place. And that's why I believe that this is really the whole idea of soft skills. I think, especially in the case of Hong Kong, it better start with the teachers having soft skills first. They better start with the principals having soft skills first before the students are asked to do it. Or else from the students' perspective, they're like, hey man, I'm already doing my DSC, my exam, I'm going to Beacon for tutorials, and I'm like going to all these classes to get my best grades. And now you're asking me to learn soft skills as well. Is that a grade that I'm going to be graded on? What is this? So if the teachers, if the principals, if the educational system does not itself advocate for this and walk what they talk, I don't believe the kids are going to do that either.
All right. Thanks. And I think at the last, the next thing I would want to bring everybody's attention to, I think, is also on the school systems, because like Ben, you've mentioned, it's important to get teachers on board. It's important to get students, parents, etc. on board. I think but in order to do that, I think it needs different parties to come together, including the corporate sector, to probably join into some of the school curriculum setting and activities. In order to have that, there is a role for the government to play in cultivating these changes as well. I think these are important things that needs to happen. From a school system level. Brian also mentioned about giving the students, teachers, etc. more exposure, and allowing them more space in their studies. What are some of the challenges that you see in implementing these changes to foster these skills and exposure while attempting to tackle the education system changes?
I can go first. I think going back to William's earlier point is about ownership. I really like your term ownership, because ultimately we are all deciding. I mean, a lot of time teachers and parents are deciding what students are supposed to be. But if you don't have the ownership, then how are you supposed to be like deciding something or going into something that you really like? I think going back to the previous question, a little bit of my experience as well, of my personal story. I think basically when you're looking for a job, especially for young people right now, it's more than a job, it's also a career for them. When you wake up every morning, whether you are motivated to go to the job or whether you are being dragged by the fact that you have to work. So I think this is something that fundamentally, whether you're owning your future or whether you are being asked to do something. I think the challenges here is like, because for parents and teachers, they feel like you have to do something before you can get a good future. But then the other example that I quoted earlier, it's not just about getting into university. It's not just about getting a good score. But then I think right now the challenge is, I mean, it seems like everyone's journey, you have to complete high school and then you go to university. And that seems to be like a success. But then in a lot of other places, or even in Hong Kong, if you drop out from a certain part in the school system, be it high school, be it associate degree or higher diploma, there is no really good support for them to go into a job that they could do, or they are being restricted to some certain jobs that they could, some certain careers that they could go into. I have been talking about a concept of multiple entry, multiple exit, that I think that would help. I mean, if there is like a system that would allow students to actually, I mean, if they are dropped out from here, they could actually go into the job, and in the end, that job would bridge them back to the mainstream education system. We're not telling students not to study. We're telling students to continue their study throughout their life. It's not just about getting a university degree at the age of 22 and you're done. It's about, like, after 22, you might have 40, 50 years of like getting involved in different parts, whether it's a job, whether it's community services, etc., etc. But over the 40, 50 years, we would learn. So I think right now we are being very narrow-minded in thinking we have to complete university between the age of 18 to 22, or else you would have no pathway out. And I think if we can tackle this challenge, we could actually bridge a longer journey for young people, for youth to be thinking broadly about what they could do. I'll give another example, and I'll pass it to William and Ben. I used to work in a US university. They had an operation in Singapore, and they do executive courses. They do a lot of executive education courses. And every time when they do executive in Singapore, it's so full. Basically, people are like, I want to sign up. And corporates are sending people to do it. And the US school came to Hong Kong a few years ago. And then when the US school first launched HKSESSA, they had so much difficulties in filling up the classes in Hong Kong. Because there's not a culture that, I mean, we even heard like employers are thinking like, I don't want to send staff out for these HKSESSA courses. I'm not saying HKSESSA is the best, but it's really about the culture. It's really about whether there is such kind of like mindset that everyone in the society wants to be upskilled, corporates are supporting young people, or employees, they feel like there is a need to do that, etc., etc. So I want to quote this example to benchmark the difference. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but then I think there is some room that we can work on that from not only from an individual level, but also on the policy or on the whole societal level.
Hi, let me quickly explain my point. I think the education system is a very complicated system. It takes 10 years or 5 or maybe 15 to make a change. But then for the corporate sector and for the rest of the world, things change very quickly, and then we cannot rely on the education system to change quick enough to help the students of today to prepare for the future. So I'm not saying that the education system is not important, but I'm really thinking like the rest of the society. While we will support teachers in helping the students in teacher development, etc., we also need to think of ways to help our young people without relying on the education system. So one way to do it is perhaps we think about helping the parents, right? The other way to do it is to think of ways to provide opportunities outside of the system where students can still learn and to get connected to the rest of the world. I think I'm not giving up on say collaborating with teachers and schools. I'm just saying that sometimes I do feel like the system is already overloaded with so many questions, and then we cannot rely on the system to respond to the changing world by itself, right? So we've got to go and help, or we work around them. Yeah, for the young people, I don't think the young people will have the patience to wait for 5, 10, 15 years for some change to happen. They simply have to, I think the society will simply have to work out something else. Ben?
Yeah, I think William really hit a very important point here, which is what do we do with the kids of today? And I think there really isn't, you can't change the system when that takes so long. So I think to cut it short, I would suggest that students today, if on the one hand, take ownership, like really drive ownership, and hopefully they understand that concept that I also really agree with William on. But on the other hand, on the more practical sense, if they can manage their schoolwork, they should really find internship jobs. There are a lot of NGOs, youth organizations that help them set up things outside of school. And for example, HK01 has an internship program as well, not directed towards university students. It could be to students who are younger and from a lower income background. That's all possible too. And I know that 01 is not the only organization that does this. Many organizations do this. But there must be some kind of network that allows students to have education outside of school, like real education. And work education is one very important factor of that, and other kinds of team experiences. So I think from the individual perspective, look for these opportunities. They still exist, and have the drive to not care about what the older generation may think about this.
Thanks for the very interesting and indeed intriguing discussions that we have here. I think time is running out. We are in the last 3-4 minutes. I'll just like to invite the audience, if you have any, we probably can take one last question if you would like to just unmute and speak, or type in the chat box. Okay, if there's no more questions, I'll keep monitoring the chat box. But if there's no more questions, then let me quickly wrap up, because there are many important concepts that, or indeed thoughts and viewpoints, insights that have been touched upon today. This skills, what does future skills mean? Whether it's soft skills or hard skills, both have different roles. Growth mindset, AQ, EQ, arguably more important for the sustainable or long-term success, or what you really need to strive in life. I think that's number one. Number two relates to the role of government in giving directions and clarity. Number three relates to school systems, having a whole school approach, bringing together different sectors, giving teachers, parents, students more chance to experience and to fail. But lastly, also probably more importantly, these all are, on different levels, on government level, on school level, what organizations can do. But ultimately, one has to take ownership of their own lives to upgrade and upskill themselves. So I think that pretty much wraps up what we have discussed today. I see one more question actually. Do you think a master's degree is more valuable than a job experience? I think does anyone want to have any? Yeah, Ben?
But anyone, please come in as well. I think this is not. I think while you're doing your master's degree, you have to think about job experience as well. I mean, it's an opportunity cost question, But there are a lot of people who just want to do academia. If that's the case, then that might be very difficult unless you can secure a job in academia. But if you're doing a master's to really improve on yourself, then please observe your colleagues or your friends who graduated from bachelor's degree and see from their experience and see what you can get from your master's degree. And likewise, in your job experience, because this is a constantly changing world, there may be come a time where you need that executive education that Brian mentioned, or an MBA in something that really ups your level, whether it's in the arts and humanities or other kinds of fields. So I don't think this is a real question. It's really dependent on you, the individual, and your opportunity cost.
Yeah. In short, I think a master's degree is something you pay to learn. And for job experience, I think people pay you so you learn, right? And but then I think it's a question of whether you're getting job satisfaction or the kind of job learning experience that you wish to get from your current job, right? And if you aspire to do something different, or you need some kind of a disruptive stimulation in your career path, I think a master's degree is a good idea. I've got 2 master's degrees, so I'm a big fan of going back to school. Maybe I'll go back to school soon to get another degree.
Okay, let me add my point of view as well. I think it depends on stages. To me, I got my master's degree when I was like a couple of years on the job, and that master's degree actually helped me, take what I was doing at that time to a more structured and systematic level, because that master's degree actually was very related to what I was doing. So that's what I gave advice to young people in the past as well. I mean, if you just have like one shot of bullet, whether you want to do your master's degree right after graduation, or whether you want to save that bullet to a couple of years later when you get to do a master's degree that would help you to actually excel in what you are doing. So I think it's, there is not a concrete answer to that. I think, well, we could debate for an hour for that. But then I think the short answer is like, it depends on the stages in your life where you feel like that master's degree would complement to what you are doing.
I think I can wrap that up in one sentence. It depends on you, not not the exact degree.
The ownership that William is talking about.
So I think let's end the session here because I know time is running short, but thank you everybody, the panelists for the insights and the delegates for your active participation and questions as well. Thank you very much, and we'll meet you again. Keep in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.